Welcome back to Gran Jaimito in the Pedroche Valley of Andalusia, Spain. Summer seems to be in full swing now. It is hot and it's getting drier and drier by the minute. Let me begin by showing you around the Wannabe food forest. We kept this here without interfering in order to protect the soil from the heat, from the sunlight. And only in the other places we let the sheep do some maintenance. And this is also to compare a little bit. This here is one of two experiments. This is a tomato plant down there. And the idea is to make it use the tree to climb up. Maybe this will work, maybe we will have to put a string there because the trunk is too thick. But it's an experiment, just something to try. He does live here, and I would assume he's also very hot by now. And here's the second part of the experiment. That is the other tomato plant. And again, the idea is to see if this trunk can be of any help. And if not, we can attach a string and use that. Basically tomato on a tree. And in here we have another experiment. Those are squashes. We have planted them in the shade of the tree, now that we have it. And of course he's stepping all over it. Ah! So, I need to remove that cat here. And the idea is that the mother plant starts to grow in the shade, and it doesn't matter if then what comes out of it is then going into the sunlight. So the plan. He can be a little bit obnoxious. Oh yeah. Don't you mess with my squashes. So, he might understand that. So these trees here are definitely doing their job. It is working out as expected. Standing below the tree, it's definitely a lot cooler. The sun is up there, and there it is really cool. It's natural air conditioning. Because the tree is sweating and therefore there's some moisture and there is shade, so there is less radiation, so this is working very well. That's the idea of this Wannabe food forest. It is still wannabe for a long time, but at least you can see some of the mechanics that are coming to life here. The sound you hear is from the drip irrigation. The water is pushing out the air. And soon this will get some much needed moisture. The trees don't need it, but the squashes there, they do. And here the bottom of that swale, right behind those trees, definitely has some moisture in there, not on the surface, but you can see the grasses are green. And if I pan up, you can also see that there is definitely roots that are able to reach moisture, and that is because of the body of water, our grey water pond that sits behind over there. It's not far away. So whoever has long enough roots will definitely be able to feed off of that water. And we have another group of 3 squashes, also tucked away in the shade. Interesting is also this. These are offspring from that tree. So there is 1, 2, 3 and 4. I think that's all. And we have some vetiver here also that we planted last time. It is coming up again. It was pretty much reduced to the slip, but it is coming up again. And I think we have another one here. So this is number 5, the same tree. And the idea is to let that grow, because it helps to get some wood in here. And that is the capsicum annuum that we planted. They are still very small. The ones at the far end there, they suffered. Probably the crickets, as one of you mentioned, actually did bite off the leaves. But there are plenty of them, and this is not for commercial harvest or anything like that. It is just so that something grows here, and they were available. And so we planted them, and now we will see how we can keep that alive. Down here a little bit of the straw is missing, and I wouldn't say that this is a very good mulch. It is too thin, but something is something. It's better than nothing. So let's not complain, and this will work out in some way. Those vetiver slips have also started to make new leaves. The temperature is right, there is moisture, so that should now grow. That outflow here is not carrying any water, because obviously the grey water pond loses by evaporation and also by seeping in. But that should not matter for the vetiver and the trees, because there should be enough in the soil, and they have now long roots, so they should definitely be able to reach the water table that we are creating here. Of course, it would be nice to have some standing water there, but for that we need some rain to fill this further up. After all, this is supposed to be the outflow in case that this runs over. You can see a slip that fell off or got removed by accident, and that slip sits in the water and is becoming green. So this might be an experiment to observe. Just by accident, vetiver can live in water, no need for soil. And you can see that they are turning green. And a shout out to the person who sent me more information about how to distribute vetiver. Thank you. And you remarked that we should cut those slip shorter. Yes, I can see that, but on the other hand, it is pretty nice to see where we planted that. And maybe it is not so important to cut them very short, because it is coming up. So we have been doing this all the time. And the ones that we received in a box from the original supplier here 3 hours away in Malaga, they were also not extremely short. But I have to say they were green, probably because they keep them to propagate in a greenhouse, which then makes it easier. Because here in that temperature, the vetiver starts growing when the temperatures are high enough. And it is at the same time when the water stops coming from the sky. So it's a double challenge. The doggies are all hiding under the house. That is their favorite spot. Yeah. Because that is the only place where it is cool. So this is quite interesting. The forecast have been sun, sun, sun and nothing of rain. But one of you guys actually mentioned in the comments of the current video, now this is obviously when you see this a little bit later, that people have been talking about rain, and yes, they did. And the radar right now all around does show thunderstorms and clouds full of moisture. And it does look like that. So if you look up here, you see that this is definitely full of water. And there's also some swell here, or swell, I think it's swell. So there is some movement in the air, and it does feel like a thunderstorm were coming. Let's hope it is. That would be very nice. So this here is the current radar image, and everything that is green and dark green means a lot of moisture. The darker, the more moisture. When there is a thunderstorm, then it will be yellow and red, or even purple. That's then a very bad one. So this is looking good. So if this definitely, if this indeed comes our way, let's see how the simulation looks like. So it might come and then disappear. That is what the simulation said. Let's go back to what the forecast says. So the forecast there says possible around 6:45 p.m, which is in an hour. And well, that's that stuff here. Here's a darker one. So it depends. So the heat made all the moisture evaporate, form those clouds, and if there is enough, plus a few other factors, then it goes boom and we have a thunderstorm. And then we have rain, which is good for us. Let's see how this turns out. If I can make a few rainy shots in an hour. So this is how much the rye has grown. I'm not an expert on rye, but I would think that this is now the maximum height it will reach. Of course, the soil is poor and nutrients and water are scarce, so that's probably as best as it can go. But there's something in there. It will now make the grains and they will fall down, and then it will come up again next year. So we get some biomass in this trench. That is why we did this. And then maybe it can hold moisture for longer, and sooner or later rainfall will then stay here and can infiltrate. But it might also be that the soil below it is in such a bad shape that it sucks up every little drop that goes into this trench. We will see. But all in all, this area that used to be extremely poor and not like that is now looking like a very nice paddock. So apparently the intervention that we did with the animals and with the straw and all that is bearing fruit. So it seems to work. And there's more and more wind, like that. And I remember how this was called. So in front of a thunderstorm you have a squall line in some cases, and that is what smells like moisture and also brings the wind and all that. But of course here in our case there won't be any very nice squall line like you can see when the thunderstorm is approaching on the open sea or from the air. It will not be that spectacular, and hopefully some drops of rain will fall, because it doesn't look like it will be much, because that forecast, you have seen the simulation, might be completely wrong. But then it's a forecast, so it shows a possibility. These guys are up there in the sacrifice paddock. They are resting, which is good. So they are very well fed for today. This here is a freshly dug trench, and we put a hose in it and filled it up with water. That has been pumping a few hours today. Some of it already infiltrated into the soil. So while it was pumping, the highest point, you can see it here, and then it infiltrated and lowered the water level, which is good. On Monday, today is Saturday, this will continue. You can see there it has been marked with some white stuff, and it will end up approximately over there where the trees are, where the jeep is. And it is on contour, which is why it stays so nicely. And it should create water pressure on the left side. Before this is completely done, that berm will disappear. So Angel, who is digging this, will then do a second pass and move all the stuff from the berm to the left, so that it's mostly flat. And then the idea is to plant some vetiver left and right, so that this whole thing over time is covered, in order to reduce evaporation, and also the vetiver will then help with whatever comes from above the slope down here, so that this trench is not filled up by things, so that it continues to be available for this purpose. And of course it will act like a regular swale. It's just more like a trench. It's not a white swale. And we will see how this experiment goes. Irrigation canals have been used for centuries, so why not? And the idea is to help the sun hemp as summer progresses. Therefore we are doing that. And I can also show you something there in the distance. That is the Sudangrass. So this is the Sudangrass, and this is not receiving any irrigation. It lives off the rainfall that we had, and maybe will have. We will see. But this is the experiment to see how drought resistant is the Sudangrass, and even if it's just being established. Looking good so far. We finally found the time to get to this long overdue project. This is to bury a water pipe so that we don't need the additional water tank in front of the house, and instead have it connected to the big tank that is there anyway. And we will have cold water again. Here and there, in special circumstances, we have to use herding instead of using a polywire or a fence and all the modern things. That works as well. Just it is that the human has to be present with the animals, and when they venture out of the assigned zone, the strip in this case, the human has to step in. This is now a lot better. Now it is open and the vetiver gets all the sunlight at once. With a little bit of water, it should quickly grow tall. And the sound you hear behind me is from the pigs. And here they are. They have gotten some water here, and they can do their own wallow. But it's pretty important, because without a wallow, the pigs will not be able to cool down, and that is pretty bad because they cannot sweat. So they need this to regulate their body temperature. So these here are some very happy pigs. Yeah, they can be a little bit naughty as well. They have also pretty much destroyed everything, which is very good. That is exactly how it was supposed to be. And now that step by step the smell starts, we will add some straw, quite a good quantity of that. That helps with the odor, and it also gives them something to play, because we don't want them to eat dirt. That is bad for them, and they can even die from it. And you see that sprinkler there in the center? This is going to be removed and put on one side, so that we can also make this area a little bit wet, which is even better. Because we keep this moist by here and there opening up the valve, so that this gets some rain, and it will then stand here for a while and make sure that the vetiver that we have planted over there has a good start. So that this area really is in a condition that this vetiver really wants to make roots and grow and therefore reach the water table. As was to be expected, now without rainfall and the high temperatures, all the grasses have gone to seed, shut off the supply to their seed head, and now the dominant color step by step will be brown instead of green. The only thing that maintains its green color is the brassicas and the Bermuda grass. That is now coming up in all the different spots where we have it. So our sunham experiment here is looking pretty cool. This area gets greener and greener. Something unseen at this time of year. So that looks like it's going to be a successful experiment. That irrigation trench or canal is now finished, and as you can see, it is full of water because we are pumping into it. That berm there to left will be flattened a little bit more so that it basically disappears, and at a later point we will also line it up left and right with vetiver in order to protect the water from evaporation, because we want the water to go below the surface to the left and help the establishing sunhemp. I can't really measure it, but I would think that this trench might be 100 meters long. So you see where it starts, and then it goes along here and eventually ends up there, which is the continuation basically, but on contour and a little bit higher, of the big swale that we have there. This little patch of Bermuda grass wasn't there before, so this is also very positive. And of course, because it's right next to the irrigation channel, it will certainly grow very well here in this area. So I guess we will have a green strip over time, left and right of this with Bermuda grass. But then we will add more things to it, so definitely this will become very nice. And originally, that I can mention, we thought of establishing or of putting the animal lane there where the fence line is. That plan needs to change. We also need to modify the entrance to this, so there we have a gate, and we need to modify this. So that gate will then be above this irrigation channel, and then the animal lane will come in there and eventually will find its way all the way to the other side. But this is the thing, I cannot really design things sitting on a desk. We need to see what the land tells us, and every time we modify something we get new information. So it is better to do this a little bit chaotic and inspect and adapt, and therefore have eventually a better design. So one could create a topo map and design all this up front and then start digging and planting and all this, but I'm not really embracing that big design up front approach. I rather do it in a more agile way. So let me do something and then I observe, and then I will react on what I see, and then I come up with new ideas, and I think that is how nature also works. I guess it's called evolution. The pump down at the outflow of the water reservoir is still working a little bit, but only a little bit, so there's a dribble that's coming through. But what I want to tell you, now that we have this here for a few days, and the other part was finished yesterday, this fills up over the day, and then overnight it infiltrates, and in the morning the cycle begins again. So this is definitely working, and the water is going somewhere where the sun hemp then will be able to find it later when the summer is a little bit further along. And this here has not received any irrigation. This is growing all based on resident moisture from the rain that came when we planted it. So that is the Sudangrass, and I am very happy how it grows. So I can definitely see that this goes up and becomes tall, because some are really sticking out already. So this also looks like a very good thing. Of course, this has this problem with prussic acid, so we have to wait until it's tall enough, because the young plants contain a compound that in the rumen of the cow makes a toxic thing, and that can then kill the cow within a few minutes, as you can read. So we better be careful with that. But then it is a great plant that requires not a lot of water, which is precisely our situation. And it's just a question of management. We don't have the problem that it will freeze. Well, it might actually, but not for long. And over winter we have a lot of other forage, so then that's probably not a huge problem. But the only thing that I don't know yet, need to think about it, is how we manage this when we have a mix. But I would think that this stops growing, because it's a heat-loving plant, when it gets cold, and so it will sit close to the ground and probably not be there at all. So therefore it's not a problem. And of course the dose makes the poison, so might not be a challenge. But that is why we only have this piece here. We have not gone all out on this. That is what the sun hemp is for. That's the alternative. Here you can see a nice close-up of the sun hemp. So nowadays these plants are a little bit taller. You can see their structure. And this can grow 1.80 meters tall. We will see how high we can get here. That irrigation channel is working. There is a wet spot, and this is not the shade. The shade is around. So you can see that this is a wet spot, and it sits a little bit below the irrigation channel. Let me introduce you to some massive Paulovnia trees. So as you can see, these guys are growing like crazy. And again, let me indicate you the new growth. So all the stuff here from the top that is green, all the way down to the former stem, that is the new growth in just a few weeks. So by the end of this summer growing period, those will be some real trees. So let me give you an idea of the size of those leaves. So here you see my hand, and now you can see what that means. So we made a slight mistake, and these boys and girls managed to get in here. We wanted to reserve this for a little longer, because we had seeded something, seeding into straw, so just in some patches. But the good thing is, this has grown and gone to seed, so now the damage is basically zero. The only thing is, they screwed up a little bit our management plan, but that's not a big problem. So it is okay. that they're here and eating that. It just means that this area here has been grazed a little bit earlier. So not a big deal. So that means I will now mark it in our application as grazing in progress, and that means the counter starts today instead of before. And you see what this guy is doing here? He's not really eating it, but he uses it to scratch. But then, oh yeah, he is eating it. But okay. He and all the others will be out by tomorrow and then won't come back for at least 45 days or so. And by then there will be no growth, because summer, no rain, and of course this is all cold season grasses. So that means the next time they come back they will eat straw in here, and that should add biomass in order to make humus, and that should then hold moisture for longer as time progresses. And this here is also something that requires a few words of explanation. So the calf is sucking milk, which is fine. The only problem is the mother very likely will not stop the calf from sucking milk, even if she is going down in weight. So the calf is able to suck the mother dry, and that means the calf kills the mother. So we have some things that we can use to wean them without separating them. So this is a plastic thing, won't hurt, that we can put in their noses so that they are not able to to suck milk. So this won't do anybody harm. And then we will move them to some supplemental feed for growth, so that the little ones can develop a good body. And then it is much more likely that we will end up with healthy calves when autumn comes around, and then there is no rainfall and therefore fresh grass. We have learned a few things since the last time. So here this afternoon the cows admitted themselves to this paddock. That is CT10, they are over there. It has had 46 days of rest, and we wanted to give it 45. So they basically came on time. But of course this is not how it's supposed to be. And the problem why that happens is those insulators allow the poly wire to get in very easily, and as long as the force pushes them down they will stay. But if there is a force that lifts them up, and that is what cows do, then of course the thing can get loose. So what we now want to do, we have some cable ties, and we can probably use them to hold the string that goes in here, that poly wire, in that. So if we fix it to here somehow and tighten up, then probably they won't be able to lift it up. But that is one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the soil is now dry, and that means it's not conducive to electricity anymore, or only a very little bit. So that means the ground, or the negative pole, is now missing, and therefore the electric shot will not come. So instead of having it all configured like this, that means all the hot wires together, we need to add an additional wire, the negative one, or maybe in between, in order to make this a plus-minus fence. And then the animal will be shocked when it touches both wires. Eventually, like we have in some other places already, this will be a wire mesh, and the wire mesh will be the negative pole, and in front of it, with some distance insulators, we will then have the hot wire. And then it is pig safe, it is safe for the cows, the whole bovine family, and we can also work with small ruminants by then. But as this is temporary, just to be able to manage the areas a little bit, This is how it is. It's not a huge problem because we move them around frequently, so there is less opportunity for that. We don't leave them alone for a week in an area, but it's still a nuisance. And now that this is dry, we definitely need to get going with the reconfiguration of those wires by adding the negative piece. And as you can see here, that is basically our winter. So elsewhere there is snow that makes it difficult to graze, and here it is summer and it is too hot, and all these grasses, there are no warm season grasses left. They won't regrow because there is no moisture. There is no moisture because there is no organic matter in the soil that is enough. The soil is compacted and all the other problems, and of course the sun is very hot. So that is our winter. And winter is our growing season. Actually it's autumn and spring, because when the temperatures drop below 5 centigrade, then the grasses won't grow either. So with a different mix of plants, we will then be able to graze year round, 365 days, that is the goal. But that is what we are facing, and we are working to fix this, and I hope it works out.